In this section, the task is to find an equation based on the graph that you're given. Now for example 1, we can see that the graph is starting on the x-axis, and then we go up, back to the x-axis, down, and then back to the x-axis. So whenever we're starting in the middle here, we're working with the sine function. And if we're starting at one of the extremes, whether it's the top or the bottom, then we're working with the cosine function. So I've established this is the sine function. So I'll start by writing y equals sine of x. But then, is this the plain sine of x function, or has anything been changed about it? So first thing I can see is that when it does go up to its maximum point, that's at 2. And then the minimum point is -2. So that means that the amplitude is 2. And this does start out by going up, back to the middle and down, and that is the way the sine function normally works, so it's +2 rather than a -2 coefficient there. Next I want to check to see, is the period the same as the normal sine function? So I can see that we're starting at 0, we haven't horizontally shifted the graph, and we end at 2 pi, which is normal, so that's just y equals 2 sine x. Let's take a look at example 2. Now here, we're starting at a maximum point and going to the middle, and then down, and then back to the middle, and then up. And then this cycle is repeated. So here we have 2 complete cycles, and this is for the cosine function. Oops. So we'll put y equals cosine x. So now let's see. Is the amplitude 1, or is it something other than what it usually is? So in this case, the max is 1, the minimum is -1, so that's going to be our normal amplitude, so just y equals cosine of x. And it starts at the maximum and then goes down to the middle, and that is also normal, so it's +1x, not -1x. So now let's look at how far does this function go. It starts at 0, and the cycle ends at pi, and then it starts a new cycle again. Normally with the cosine function, we go from 0 to 2 pi. So this tells me that the period is equal to pi. Well, that means that 2 pi over b, which is our period, is equal to pi. So now I can solve this for b, and that means that b is equal to 2. So it's not just the cosine of x, it's the cosine of 2x. And the parentheses are optional. When I'm writing it by hand, it makes more sense to use the parentheses. And let's see, there's not been any horizontal shifting, there's not been any vertical shifting, so that's our function. Now, in example 3, we're starting at -2 and then going up to the middle, up to the top, back to the middle, and then down again. Since we're starting at an extreme, we're talking about the cosine function. And since we're starting at the bottom and then going up, this is the negative of the cosine function. But it's not just a -1 cosine x, because it starts at -2 and goes all the way up to +2. Now there hasn't been any vertical shifting because the middle is still at the x-axis, so we haven't shifted it all vertically. So now, let's fix this. And now we have -2 cosine x. Now that would be fine, except is the period 2 pi? Is the period 2 pi? That's what we're asking. So we start at 0, and we're ending at 2, so the period is just 2. And we know that that's 2 pi over b. So I set that equal to 2, and solve for b. And that means that b is equal to pi. So that's the negative 2 cosine pi times x. And since there's no vertical or horizontal shifting, that'll be the answer. Now here we can see immediately that the graph has been shifted up because it doesn't ever touch the horizontal axis. So let's see, how much has it been shifted up by? Normally, this function, well, let's see, it's starting at the minimum and going up from there to the middle, and then up to the top, back to the middle, and back down again. So this is the cosine function. And so our horizontal axis would normally be right here. But the graph has been shifted up, and let's see how much it's been shifted up, 1, 2, 3 units. So how can I tell that's how much it's been shifted? What I do is I look for where the center of the graph is, because it's limited. It only goes from 1 to 5. So what's halfway between 1 and 5 is 3. So we have y equals, and it's the cosine function, and I also know it's negative 2 cosine because the amplitude is 2. That's the distance from the middle to the top. So it's negative 2 cosine. Let's see, let's just assume it's x for now. We'll worry about the period in a minute. And it's been shifted up 3 units. So I can take this and add a 3. It's hard to tell, do we mean x plus 3 and then take the cosine of it, or do we mean cosine x and then add a 3 on the end? So rather than writing it that way, what I would do is write 3 minus 2 cosine x. And then, of course, the period is not 2 pi in this case. The period is going, let's see, we're going from 0 to 2, so the period equals 2, and that's 2 pi over b. So that tells me that b is equal to pi. And you just do that by solving for b. So now we have 3 minus 2 cosine of pi times x. Now, has this been horizontally shifted? No, it hasn't, because again, we're starting at 0 here. So now we get to the very last example. And here we can see immediately there's a horizontal shift because we're not starting at 0. So the graph has been shifted to negative pi over 4. So it's been shifted left pi over 4 units. And before we deal with the horizontal shift, I'll have to figure out what the period is. So in this case, we're starting at negative pi over 4, and we're ending at 5 pi over 12. So the period is the difference between those two. So I need to take 5 pi over 12 minus a negative pi over 4. And this gives us 5 pi over 12 plus pi over 4. And getting common denominators, oh, let's see, that's 8 pi over 12, which is 2 pi over 3. All right, so that's our period. So that means that 2 pi over b is equal to 2 pi over 3. So therefore, b is equal to 3 in this problem. So, to start constructing this function, we have y equals, now let's check out the amplitude. We go as low as -3, as high as +3, so we know that there's no vertical shifting because the center is exactly halfway in between, and it's at the horizontal axis. So we have the amplitude is 3. We're starting in the center, so this is the sine function. And since it goes down instead of up, it's -3 sine. And now this is the sine of what? B is 3. So it's 3x plus c. Now we don't know what c is yet. So we'll find out c based on the horizontal shift. So let me make some room here. Okay. All right. So we know that we can find the horizontal shift by setting 3x plus c equal to 0 and solving for x. So we get 3x equals -c and x equals -c over 3. But this should be a -pi/4 because we know that the graph is being shifted over pi/4 units to the left. So therefore we can solve this equation for c, and obviously the negatives immediately cancel out, and just multiply both sides by 3, and we get c equals 3 pi/4. So let's come back up here and fix this up. So it's plus 3 pi/4. And since there's no vertical shift, that's our final answer.